Hi everybody, welcome to our part one of the writing CPD, the new writing structure for 2021. In this PowerPoint, I'm going to talk you through a range of different aspects of the new writing structure, which hopefully will complement what we already do. So intentions of this meeting really, it's to review and share the feedback of the old writing structure. It's sort of to outline the rationale behind the new writing structure, and really it's to introduce the new writing structure to you all. As I've previously said, hopefully it's not going to be too different. It's going to be much more manageable, and hopefully it's going to act on the feedback and the discussions that I've had with the team. The CPD will take place in two parts and across two different sessions. So the focus today will be to introduce the new structure. I'll be introducing you to the new policy. And there will be a focus on the narrative teaching side of it. And then the second session will be a focus on the non-fiction writing sequence. And that will all become clear as we go through. In the second session as well, I do want to create some opportunities so that you can go away and have a play with your partner teacher, however that might look, planning a unit of work, just so that you are familiar with the expectations of the new structure. So in terms of the audited findings and staff voice and monitoring, I just want really to put in a nutshell why we are changing the writing structure. And I think the most important thing that I want to mention here before we go any further is this bit, is that actually when you focus on the process, amazing things happen. And I feel like at the moment we haven't got that sort of embedded within our writing structure. So at the moment, we're pretty much focused on the outcome rather than the build up to the right and high quality writing. And that needs shifting, especially with the recovery curriculum and where we know children are coming back to school from remote learning in terms of writing. We really need to make sure that that process is a focus. Having spoken to people across the team, in Key Stage 1 especially, I know a lot of the feedback was around the pace. So actually, I know we did change our writing offer for the remote teaching, but the pace of the sequences is often too quick for the younger children. So some people feel like we're working through genres too quickly, and because of that, the children can't keep up. They haven't had the time to explore language, to explore sentences, which is a big part of what we've changed in this structure. At the moment, we are quite limited in the opportunities that we give to children in terms of acquiring key vocabulary and key language around topics that they're being expected to write about. So if I think of Year 6, for example, if I was asking Year 6 to write a non-chronological report about the Vikings, that would be really difficult to do for a child who doesn't have any knowledge about the Vikings. So it's up to us to create those opportunities within the sequence of writing to make sure that they've got all of the necessary knowledge and vocabulary that they need, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. Another part of it is that actually children need time to sculpt their writing. This was part of the discussions and feedback that I've had, and this sort of came through as a theme in monitoring as well. So actually, because we're so sort of in a routine with the current writing structure, it can almost feel a bit bam, 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 and we're not actually slowing down to appreciate that children need to see the teacher modelling the writing process. They need to see you thinking out loud. They need to see you shaping and sculpting sentences. And currently, we haven't got enough opportunity for that. So that's another thing that we're sort of acting on within this new writing structure. In Key Stage 2, this goes back to the first point really, is that actually, if we want those really high quality writing outcomes, we've got to be more concerned with the build up to the end point, rather than we race through the first part of the structure, which is guided, and that's the most crucial part, to then moving on to the very end where children are completely independent. At the moment, there's a bit of an imbalance with that. We're more weighted towards the end of the sequence rather than the start of it. And that doesn't make any sense at all, because children need those opportunities to be exposed to language, to be exposed to modelling, teacher demonstrations. And at the moment, we perhaps could be doing a bit more around that. And then the final one really is the monitoring, and what that sort of demonstrated is that actually SPAG at the moment, lots of our sessions, we seem to have become a little bit lost with it, and I know that I have as well, is that some of those SPAG sessions are being taught discreetly when all of the research around teaching spelling, punctuation and grammar within English sequences, the research demonstrates that it has the biggest impact when it's taught in a context. So not when it's just 10 sentences on a page and that's it for your SPAG lesson, and not when it doesn't link to the class novel. So we're really going to come back to the SPAG aspect of it. And hopefully what you will see in this structure is that it's more geared towards the teaching of SPAG and the modelling of SPAG, but within a context, not standalone and not discrete. And we will talk more around that in the second half of this CPD. The other thing I wanted to add here, and I do hope that most people will agree with me, is that because we are in such a routine with the writing structure, it does feel a little bit like the creativity within our writing sequence has been lost. So we have lost those opportunities where children just get the chance to explore a certain topic that's going to help them progress within the sequence. We have sort of lost the drama side of it, the speaking and listening side of it. So I'm hoping that what I talk about today will bring all of those things back to the forefront. The other thing I would add as well is that the SPAG at the moment, where we teach our SPAG, there doesn't seem to be any cohesion across the lessons, and I will talk more around that as we go through this PowerPoint. So the rationale. So the new writing sequence will allow children the time to build up and develop ideas which are cohesive. So where we're teaching SPAG sessions, they're not going to be disjointed. They're all going to have a clear purpose. They're all going to link. And by the time the children get to that practice right, they've got a wealth of lessons and ideas that they can put into practice and apply, where they piece the structure together. So all of those ideas throughout the week are not going to be wasted. The other part of this rationale is obviously to aid the recovery process. We know that writing, not just for Ash Green, is a massive focus nationally. Writing is the thing that's dropped off for many schools. And as I've already mentioned, we need to be focusing really on the sentence construction and the punctuation and grammar. And this new sequence will allow for that. The new writing sequence will be deeply rooted in teacher demonstrations and the modelling of writing, and lessons will be very much chunked. That's the approach that we will be taking to writing. So there's no opportunity for any child to get lost during class discussions, during the actual sustained pieces of writing, because we're constantly bringing children back to what the focus needs to be. And the other thing as well, and this is quite a big one, at the moment we follow one writing sequence, and that's quite tricky and quite difficult, because when we're writing a narrative sequence or we're writing a non-fiction, actually we're expecting two very different outcomes. So the one planning structure, the one sequence of writing doesn't necessarily fit for those two different types of genres. Actually, they need to be different because we're expecting different outcomes, and hopefully you'll see how that's sort of pieced together as we go further through. So before we go any further, I do want to make it clear, I haven't just made this up overnight. There has been a lot of research around this. It's been a labour of love, so please do go easy on me. In terms of external training, there has been a lot of training that I've taken part in now, delivered by an external consultant, and that's Jane Considine. I know that I have sort of circulated her name around via email previously, because some of her work is really, really good. And what we've now been able to do is to cherry pick different aspects of her work that will complement what we already do and will help us refine what we already do. The other exciting thing that I do want to mention is that an in-house CPD interactive writing channel on YouTube has now been set up, and that's called The Right Way. So this channel will go live after this meeting, and it will cover every aspect of the new writing structure for your use as and when required. So obviously we have benefited some ways from this time. I've got a bit more savvy with technology, which means now I'm hoping that this writing channel is a platform of CPD for teachers across school. And the idea is that it's a manageable CPD platform. So if you are unsure of certain aspects of the writing structure, you can log into the YouTube channel, you can root through, say, right, I'm struggling with the sentence stacking lessons, or I'm struggling with how to deliver an independent write session, and there will be a wealth of videos on there, only 10 minutes long max, that you can watch those different aspects in action to support you in your own practice. So that is really exciting. And I do hope that eventually we can sort of build on that a little bit further. So as the writing structure becomes further embedded, best practice across school can be uploaded to that platform as well. So I know we've got some really great teachers across school who are really confident with the delivery of writing. So hopefully over time, it won't just be me on there delivering aspects of the training I've had, or me teaching to year 6. I'm hoping we can get a broad spectrum of videos of excellent practice in writing. A new writing policy has also been reviewed. That will also be shared with you, and it reflects everything that I'm about to talk about during this session. This is a really rigorous and thorough document, and the one thing that I would say is that please use it, because everything you need is in that document. So if you're unsure of any aspect of the writing structure, please refer to it, because it will help you. It is quite a lengthy document, but it's easily digestible. It's chunked into the aspects of the writing structure, so you don't need to read it all. If it's just one aspect that you're uncertain of, go back to it, because it really is like a Bible. And I've purposely made it a lot more thorough this time and a lot more explicit, because I think it was fair to say that the old one perhaps wasn't as thorough as it could have been. The right stuff, the exemplifications bank. This is another aspect of writing I've been working on. I know that writing is the one that's really difficult to assess, and that's partly because we don't have standardised assessments for writing. So there is an exemplifications bank now for each year group. Again, I will share that in the follow-up meeting, and that hopefully is going to support teacher assessment and teacher judgment, and they can be used in PPM meetings. And what that writing standards bank is it's examples of best writing across school for vulnerable children, expected and greater depth children. So if you are unsure, you've got a bit of a benchmark within your year group to go back to that and have a look at it and think, does this child meet the vulnerable standard in this writing exemplifications bank? And you can see what they're missing, what they might need to do next to improve further. So that's another really exciting thing, and I'm hoping that will support staff. The right stuff. So this is training that I took part in. So there's a wealth of materials that I will be sort of downloading and putting onto staff share. There's access to a handbook, and we've got 1 year access through an individual license to the course materials. So if anybody did want to dip into that at any point, I am more than happy to pass on my details so you can access that. But as I say, most of the stuff that we've cherry picked will be on our internal house CPD platform on the YouTube channel. So that's why I've done that, really, so that everyone can access it through our own channel. And then obviously over the next few weeks, just to further support staff, I am hoping to put on some CPD team sessions around the new writing structure. So as we start to roll it out in each year group, there'll be sessions where you can drop in and you can ask questions. So have I done this right? Or I did this today, this didn't quite work well, what could I do here? And hopefully I can support you that way as well. So they're just some notes to bear in mind. So now we will get on to the exciting part, which is the new writing structure. And I am very excited about it, because I do think it will be amazing. I think it will give children more clarity. I think they'll be able to articulate better which part of the writing structure they are on. I think it will support staff. So I do hope that you like it just as much as me, and I hope that you feel inspired by it just as much as me. So the new writing structure. So once you've nailed this bit, it should become relatively quite easy. But there's a few tweaks and changes that have been made just to help us seek clarity over what children are doing, when they're doing it, and why they're doing it. So as it says here, our new policy is built around the above symbols. So basically the policy and the new writing structure follows a symbol system. And teachers need a clear understanding of what each symbol stands for. And these symbols represent a different part of the writing sequence. Now, before I go any further, these symbols here, which I'll show you later on, these symbols will now be on children's success criteria, which there's a separate template for all staff. So every lesson, children and staff will see these symbols, and this will help children to familiarise themselves as to what part of the sequence they are on. Okay, and the big thing to remember now in this new structure is there's not one planning sequence anymore, there is two. And as I've already mentioned, the reason that there's two different sequences, and this will become clear as I go through, is that a narrative genre is very different to a non-fiction genre. So the things that you're asking children to do should be quite different because the outcomes should be different. Non-fiction genres focus a lot more on the structure, the purpose, the layout, whereas your narrative genre is much more around your sentence construction, it's much more around your figurative language and your detail. So it's really important that when you are planning, you either follow the narrative sequence, if it is a narrative unit you're doing, or a non-fiction sequence if it's the non-fiction genre that you are doing a unit of work on. And there are different symbols to follow in the different sequences. So the narrative sequence uses less of these symbols than the non-fiction genre does, and that's because a non-fiction genre is more difficult to teach in certain aspects. So it's really important that you understand what your genre is before you're planning that unit of work. If it's a narrative sequence, you've got to refer to the policy and you've got to be following the narrative sequence of work with the narrative symbols, okay? And children over time will become familiar with that as well. So I'm going to talk you through the symbols now and what they mean, okay? And it does go into more detail as we go through. So this one here is called Find the Shape, and they're not in any particular order, and I'll come on to that later on. A Find the Shape symbol basically tells the children that today this is a model text lesson. This is an annotation lesson. So this shape actually does appear in both sequences, this symbol does. So actually at the start of your sequence, like we do already, you will provide children with a model text so they can see what the expectations are of that sort of genre. So if I was doing a character description and a narrative sequence, the Find the Shape would be probably the first symbol in my sequence, and children would tick that off that lesson to say that actually today I've completed a Find the Shape lesson. That again will also be a symbol that features in the non-fiction sequence, and children will need to see a model at the start of that sequence. This one here is a new addition. So that first one is pretty similar to what we've already done. The Experience Day is a nice, exciting one. This is the one that I really, really like, and we'll come back and do more work around this one. This bit here is the magic of writing that we've lost. So the opportunities for drama, for speaking and listening, for hot sitting, for role playing, these experience days allow children the opportunity to gather the required knowledge and vocabulary that they need to progress forward in that sequence. So as I've previously mentioned, if I was asking children to write a non-chronological report all about mammals, if children didn't have the knowledge of mammals, they wouldn't be able to carry on with that sequence. So an experience day is a day, it's not off timetable, it's still to do with the writing sequence. It's a day where it's an exciting part of the writing structure, if you like. So it's a day where teachers carefully plan and drop in over the course of the sequence an opportunity for children to acquire the vocabulary and knowledge they need that will support their writing. So an experience day could be setting your classroom up like a courtroom to do a bit of debating if they were doing a persuasive speech or a debate. It might be that it is having a guest speaker in on site, obviously in normal time, so that children can hear an expert talk about a certain theme or topic. It might be an experience day that is children going to the ICT suite because they need to research a certain aspect. And we will we'll come back to the experience days more in terms of how learning objectives and things should look, but that in essence is what experience days are, okay? And again, experience days actually feature in both sequences. So those two at the moment, both symbols are a part of both the narrative sequence and the non-fiction sequence. Sentence stacking lessons, the SPAG lessons, are more geared to the narrative sequence, but they can still be used in the non-fiction sequence, and that is at the teacher's discretion. These lessons are your SPAG lessons, basically, but the difference this time is that these lessons must provide a pathway to the final writing outcome. So they must be cohesive, and they must provide children with the opportunity to practice the SPAG element that you want them to, but in a context. So it's not a case of, right, today we are practicing DD sentences or 2-pair sentences, 2A sentences, and you're all going to write 5 2A sentences. That might be okay for Key Stage 1, but in Key Stage 2, that might just be a starter activity. So the teacher will be modelling that in a context linked to the genre, linked to the practice right, so that over time children have got a number of sentences to put into their practice right. But then there should be more opportunities within those sentence stacking lessons for sustained writing. So over time, what we should see over those lessons is paragraph writes. So we're not just writing and filling in sentences, filling in the gaps with punctuation. They are opportunities for children to write at length and to apply what the teacher has modelled that lesson. So I hope that bit makes sense, but I will come on to that a bit further on. Jigsaw lessons. So this lesson here is more geared towards the non-fiction genres. So your non-fiction teaching sequence, children will have jigsaw lessons where they will write through the specific features that the teacher feels that they need to practice in order to put that piece of writing together. So this jigsaw one does not appear in the narrative sequence. And again, go back to the policy, it explains all of this really, really clearly. So for example, if I was doing a non-fiction genre in my unit of work, and let's say, for example, the outcome that week was children were writing a play script. At the moment, there is little opportunity in our sequence for children to practice the features. So this is what the jigsaw lesson does. So a play script is quite difficult, even for upper key stage 2 children to compose, never mind lower key stage 2. Okay. And that is because there are a number of different things in terms of the structure that children need time to practice. So if you think about the structure of a play script, you've got things like introducing the setting, you've got things like the cast members' names down the side, you've got things like stage directions, which are in brackets and often in italics. These jigsaw lessons provide children with the opportunity to write through the features. So in these lessons, children actually practice sections of the writing structure. So if it was a newspaper report, children might need a lesson where they're practicing writing headlines, they're practicing writing a lead-in paragraph with the who, the what, the where, the why, the when. So those lessons, they don't replace your sentence stacking lessons because the emphasis is still on sentence construction, but they are there and they should be seen within the non-fiction sequence. And it doesn't need to be every aspect of that genre that the children need to practice over a series of days. It's the bits that they will find the most tricky that they need to practice. So I might spend a lesson on doing the lead-in paragraph for a newspaper report. I'll model it. Children will then go away and have a go at writing their own, linked to what their practice right might be. Okay. The lightning strike is your practice plan and your practice right, which is what we do anyway. And then your independent plan and your independent right is almost is the same as what we do anyway. The big things here is, this will be the big shift for most people, is that the practice plan and the practice right will be chunked. So by chunked, I mean your lesson will be, right, we're going to spend the first 15 minutes looking at this aspect of the plan. I'm going to model this to you. You're now going to go away and you're going to do your own version on your practice plan. You can use the ideas that I put up on the board. You've got 15 minutes, off you go. After that time, the children are brought back to the carpet, to the whiteboard, to the teacher's focus. Okay, let's share what we've done now. We're now going to move on to the next section. So what you get there then is no plot pushers, basically. No child can push forward and lose their way or get lost because one person's on the end of their plan and another person is only on the first 5 minutes of their plan. They've only completed one box. That's the same with independent rights and practice rights. So every teacher will have experienced it. You know that I experience it all the time. So after the first 5 minutes, I have someone who's still writing their introduction, and then I have someone who's finishing. They're on the end of their progress right because they've written that quick and they've not thought about what they're writing. The point of chunking is to slow children down, and it's to get them to think about the quality of their work. So that the chunking is under the direction of the class teacher. So you are constantly modelling, go away and write. Come back, model, go away and write. Model, go away and write. And that is the sort of model apply cycle that these lessons will be following. So teachers will have a very clear role within these sessions, and that will be what the expectations are in a writing session. That's what we should see. Plenty of modelling, model, apply, model, apply. So we are chunking the lessons. No child is getting lost. They're slowing down, they're thinking about the work, and there's no plot pushing. Okay, so I hope those symbols make sense. We are going to talk about them in more detail now. So what do the two sequences look like? Okay, so we've got a narrative sequence, a narrative writing sequence, and I have put here a reminder of what those symbols are. Okay, so you've got your find your shape session, which is your model text. You've got experience sessions, and I will add the experience session doesn't have to come after your annotation session. I'll talk about that later on. It's up to you where you drop that in as you see fit. Sentence stacking lessons, focus on the sentence construction with regards to Al and Pete sentence types, which is now in the policy, and I'll come on to that later on. Practice planning, practice write, independent plan, independent write. So your narrative writing sequence is there, okay? That is the structure that you need to follow, and that's in the policy. In the non-fiction writing sequence, it's slightly different. So you can see here, there are a few more symbols. And as I say, over time, children will become more familiar with it. So you've got to find the shape, again, so children need to see a model text. But then here, you've got jigsaw lessons. So for example, as I've already mentioned, it might be a lesson on writing headlines. It might be a lesson on subheadings, okay? So the jigsaw lessons are an addition in that writing sequence that's different to the narrative sequence, okay? Sentence stacking lessons can also be included, but I'd say they'd be more so within your jigsaw lessons. So for example, if my children were practicing an aspect of a newspaper report, which is speech, so indirect and direct speech, that still is your sentence stacking, but you're still teaching around the feature, if that makes sense. You might have other sentence stacking lessons dropped in, but in your non-fiction sequence, it will mainly be your jigsaw lessons. But the way that those jigsaw lessons are delivered will still focus on your punctuation and grammar. You'll have experience days still, is where you see fit. Practice plan, practice write, independent plan, independent write. So that is basically your two different teaching sequences. And as I said before, it's up to the teacher to have a clear handle on, is this a narrative sequence or is it a non-fiction sequence? If it's narrative, this is the sequence I'm following. These are the symbols I need to make sure are in my planning. If it's non-fiction, this is what I need to follow. Okay. As we move on then, so we're now going to have a little look at a narrative unit example and a non-fiction unit example. So this is just a snapshot of what your planning sequence might look like, okay? Now, the first thing to mention here, because this is one that I snipped, is obviously you'd have your model text at the very, very beginning. But then you can see here, this one is a story, okay? So if we assume that this genre is a story that's being written, here, after the model text has been provided to the children, on the next day, you'd have your experience session. Now, I'd like to make a point of saying, so if this was a character description, let's go with the character description. I'd provide children with a character description on that first day. But then, if I was writing about the wolf in the Three Little Pigs, and my children needed some sort of experience to know what the appearance of wolves were, what the behaviour of wolves is, what the personality of a wolf is. If they haven't got that knowledge, I might choose before my sentence stacking lessons to drop that experience in. So in that lesson, children are going to research all about wolves, because anything they research in this lesson can be used over the coming days for the different paragraphs that they're going to write, okay? Once they've done that, they've then acquired knowledge and vocabulary that they didn't have before, which will help them to progress through the sequence. So on the next day, I'm now going to drop in a sentence stacking lesson because this is a narrative unit. It's not a jigsaw lesson because it's narrative. I'm focusing on sentence construction. I'm focusing on the punctuation and grammar. So on this day here, I'm going to decide that because on my practice write, I want children to structure their writing as appearance paragraph, a behaviour paragraph, a personality paragraph. Because that's the structure I want them to build up towards, I'm going to spend this sentence stacking lesson here on appearance. So within that lesson, it might be that I want children, if they're in year 2, to be using 2A sentences for the appearance of what a wolf looks like. As the teacher, I'm going to model 2A sentences, and then what I might do is ask children to then put that into a paragraph all about the appearance of a wolf, so that over time they are building up the paragraphs that they will then apply to their practice right, and they are cohesive over time. They're not standalone sessions, they link directly to what the practice right will be. So I will follow that model apply structure. So I'll model what a two-way sentence is. Children will have an opportunity to do that in their books. And then as the lesson progresses, I might think, right, children have grasped this now. Let's put this into a more sustained piece. So let's try and build up a paragraph together as a class, first of all, and then children can do the same individually and they'll go away and apply it. So by the end of that lesson, they might have an appearance paragraph, but they'll at least have two-way sentences that they've written all to do with the wolf. The next day, I know that in my practice right, the next paragraph is a behaviour paragraph, all about how wolves behave. So because of that, I'm now going to move on, shift the focus of what I want in that behaviour paragraph, and think about what sentence types do I want in that paragraph, what punctuation and grammar do I want in there. Because it's behaviour, if I'm thinking of Key Stage 2 this time instead of Key Stage 1, it might be that I want to include show, not tell. Okay, so I'm going to spend a lesson today on show, not tell, because I know that's a more sophisticated way to demonstrate to the reader how a wolf is behaving. So again, model, apply. So I'm going to talk to children, what is show, not tell? Why do we use it? I'm going to model what show, not tell is. They're going to have a go. Obviously, your work can still be differentiated in terms of your expectations. Bring it back, what have we got? Let's share some models of best practice. And then let's try and compose that now and build it up. Let's stack those sentences together. We might include some two-way sentences from yesterday, and we can tweak them and put them in as behaviour. And let's build a paragraph together. And again, by the end of that lesson, then hopefully children have got a wealth of sentences and ideas to put into their practice right for their behaviour paragraph. Same again on the next day. So another sentence stacking lesson. I know that my third paragraph, in that right is going to be all about personality. So today I'm going to think about how I can integrate sentence construction, punctuation and grammar into that third paragraph session. And that is going to link to the personality. Same will apply again, model, apply, model, apply. So you're constantly chunking, you're constantly bringing children back, so you're getting that quality writing. Obviously, this is just an example. More sentence stacking lessons are there. You might not need that many sentence stacking lessons. It depends what aspect of your genre you're focusing on. But it must tie in directly to your practice right. It's no good children writing sentences that have got nothing to do with that practice right, otherwise we're missing a trick. All of that language and vocabulary needs to build up to create a fantastic practice right. And then when it comes to the independent, children can use everything that they've done, flip it on its head and apply it in a different context. You can see in this unit plan here, the teacher's dropped another experience day in for whatever reason. There's no saying that you'd have to follow that order. But what I will say is wherever you drop an experience day in, you need to make sure that your sentence stacking lesson the day after, so your SPAG focus links directly to that experience. So another way that I could have done it is rather than research wolves generally on that first day as an experience day, I could have researched the appearance. And then the next day they write about the appearance. Then I might drop in another experience day about behaviour. The next day they write about it. Drop in another experience day about personality. The next day they write about it. But the one thing I will say is this all works fantastically well, but you've got to judge as the class teacher how long you need for that genre. It's no good putting 5 experience days in. They've got to be timely and they've got to link directly to children acquiring knowledge and acquiring vocabulary. Otherwise, they are pointless. And also keep in mind our expectations of how much writing evidence we're expecting over the course of the term. So I know we continue to use Boxing Clever for narrative, but also trying to aim for those 4 pieces of writing, because obviously we can't lack on the evidence. So you have got to think carefully about the length of your genre, which genres you are covering, and that is something I'm going to go back to as well. So experience days and sentence stacking days, you can see there, the reason it's been highlighted is because all of that top part of the sequence is heavily modelled and guided by the class teacher. Okay, you've then got your lightning strike in, which indicates at that point children are going to use all of those lessons to then put that and piece it together into a practice write. And what the magic about this is now is that actually, because you've focused and you've zoned in on those areas of the genre that you want children to write about in your sentence stacking lessons, because you've done that, children are so much better equipped to do that practice write. Because over the course of those 3 lessons where I covered appearance, personality and behaviour, children have got a minimum of 15 sentences, maybe even more, language, vocabulary that will support their practice write. And now all they need to do, they've got the platform, they've got the foundations, they need to build up and they need to put that into a practice write. But you can see, they can almost see their writing unfolding, because on the first day they did appearance, on the next day they did behaviour, on the next day they did personality. So over the course of those days, they can almost see their practice write coming together. This second bit here is the independent write. So that is where it's completely independent. In terms of your planning, you will notice that what I mentioned earlier is the independent plan can still be chunked. It's chunked for the class teacher and it's chunked for the children. So if children choose to use those things, they absolutely can. And there will be a clear role now in the independent sessions, which I'll come on to later on. So it won't just be a case of children, off you go, you've got 1 hour, go and put together your character description. We're moving away from that now because we're almost wasting the role of the teacher as facilitator. So actually within that independent session, writing will be chunked again under the teacher's direction. So actually now, and again, it stops the plot pushers. So you've got 20 minutes now, go and write me your lead-in paragraph for your newspaper report. After that, the teacher stops them, right, wherever you're up to now, children, we are moving on, you are now going to write this section. Okay, now come on more to independent writes later on. Another example here is a non-fiction unit, which we'll talk more about in the second CPD session. So you can see that the symbols are slightly different. You've got a find a shape lesson, so that's your model text one, which should have been on that one at the start. Don't know why it isn't. Then you've got experience days, some sentence stacking days dropped in if needed. But what I'll also say here is where these sentence stacking days are. The reason I've put it in as a sentence stacking day there is because if I just put it in as a jigsaw lesson, people will get confused and they'll just think that they don't have to focus on sentence construction at all, when actually you still need to be focusing on the punctuation and grammar side of it, even if it is a jigsaw lesson. Okay, so that there is sentence stacking or jigsaw lessons, depending on what your genre is. More experience days, but to be honest, this isn't the best example because you wouldn't need that many experience days, and if you did, you're not going to get through the genre, you're not going to get enough evidence. So think very carefully. You shouldn't really need maybe 1, 2 at the most experience days within your sequence. Again, all of this top bit here is guided. Lightning strike, you've got your practice plan, your practice write, and then you go to your independent write, okay? Again, which is chunked. Okay, next slide. So I've kind of talked over the narrative sequence. I'm not going to talk over that one again. A little reminder again of what the different elements are of that narrative sequence. So it's a really good idea to be going back to that policy when you're planning. Have I included an annotation lesson, a find the shape lesson? Have I included a sentence stacking lesson? Have I included experience days? Have I included practice planning and practice writes? Have I included independent writes, independent planning? Because if you haven't met the criteria for that sequence. So it's really important that you know those symbols inside and out. Some key questions to ask yourself when you are planning the narrative unit is, which part of the class novel is this narrative going to link to? What's the knowledge and vocabulary that children need? Because that will steer your experience sessions. And have I included all of the elements of sequence 1? Okay, and that will be really clear in children's books, because children each lesson will be expected to tick which symbol they focused on. And in pupil voice and monitoring, children should then over time be able to articulate which aspect of the writing sequence they're on. And they should also know, is it a narrative unit or is it a non-narrative unit? Okay, so what I've done now is, and this is actually on staff share, so I'm not going to talk about it for ages, but you can have a look in your own time. I've sort of put together an example of a narrative unit and what it might look like based on all the things that I've said. So I focus on the 3 little pigs, Key Stage 1, and this obviously isn't a planning structure, but this is just basically the sequence of lessons in the order that I'm going to follow. So basically they're going to be writing a character description. So on the first day they see a model text and I've said what the activity is going to be. I've also put why, I've put that model text there, and I've put a rationale. Why have I dropped that experience day in there? Why have I dropped the sentence stacking day in there? So hopefully it will give you more guidance. Experience day, children need more knowledge of finding out about a wolf, which I already mentioned. So I'm going to have a research day in the ICT suite, and they're going to make notes of that lesson in their English book. It might be that they are role-playing, interviewing a wolf, so they can learn more about his mannerisms and his behaviour and his unpredictability. So it's whatever you see fit for the experience. Straight after that experience day, because I know that the first paragraph is going to be an appearance, I'm focusing on appearance, and that was my experience day there. And then you can see the order of which I've dropped things in. So really, it's pretty much a similar sequence to what we already follow, with the exception of we've got more of a focus on SPAG and we've got the odd experience day dropped in. But you can see that it's just over a week, that genre is. It's not a 3-week genre. Obviously, some things will lend themselves more to a longer genre. But what I would say is, as a class teacher, you need to bear in mind, if you're doing a 2.5-week genre, your other genres that half term, you're going to have to really think about so that you can get your writing evidence in. And it might be that you need to use Boxing Clever to support that as well. Key questions again. Do I have all the features of the unit? Does the experience day I've dropped in feed directly into the sentence work? Do my sentence stacking lessons provide a pathway? That is really important. They shouldn't be disjointed. They've got to have a clear pathway so that by the time children get to that practice right, they feel like they can use every single lesson in that order to help them formulate their practice right, because that is the whole point, is that we are guiding that first part of that sequence so that when it gets to the independent right, they're just applying it in a different context. Have I created opportunities within sentence stacking lessons and independent sessions for chunking? That's really important. That's a big difference to what it is now. So there's got to be chunking in those sentence stacking lessons. The teacher, there's a huge emphasis now on the teacher modelling. And there's a wealth of videos on the interactive writing channel where you can see me modelling things. I'm not saying they're the best, you know, there's lots of great practice across school, and that's what I was saying earlier. I really hope to, at some point, begin to build on that platform more. But it's just opportunities for you to see somebody else doing it in action. So different people modelling writing, seeing me modelling writing, how I use the success criteria, how I question the children, seeing me chunk the lesson. So, okay, I'm doing this bit, now you're going to go away and do that, right, I'm bringing it back. So have you done that within your sentence stacking lessons? Is there a heavy focus on modelling in your sequence? If there isn't, you need to go back and review it, because all of this is rooted in teacher demonstrations. And in my sentence lessons, are they linked directly to the class novel? So not because I'm doing DD sentences, there's a worksheet on Twinkle, I'm going to download that and use that. It's got to link, it needs to link as far as possible to your class novel, because the idea is that over the sequence of lessons, children are seeing their practice right unfold. They can't do that if the SPAG lessons are discrete and they don't link and they're not in context. So I hope that makes sense. That bit there is all on staff share, and I will talk to you about that later on in this CPD session. So there'll be an example of a narrative sequence there, and there's also an example of a non-fiction sequence. So you can see, I'm not saying it's the perfect model, you might tweak it, but obviously your text annotation is always going to be the start of the sequence. Where you choose to put in the experience days and the sentence stacking days is up to you, and then obviously your practice right and your independent right will come at the end of that sequence as normal. So more on sentence stacking lessons. I've kind of touched upon this already. They should provide a pathway and be a build up to the practice right. They should be cohesive. So by that, they should be linked over time to build up to that practice right. So it's no good me doing an appearance paragraph for the character description, and then the next day I'm just going to do, I don't know, something on the way that the wolf eats, if it's nothing linked to the behaviour paragraph. That probably wasn't the best example, really. But hopefully you get the gist. There's no good me doing a paragraph on day one that links to the practice right, but then the next day doing nothing that links to it. Children need to see that practice right unfolded, so that all those paragraphs makes their job easier then. It makes their life easier when they get to that practice right. This is really important. Sentence stacking lessons are not lessons for children to just write down 10 sentences over and over. And I think we do fall into a trap of that sometimes. I know I've been guilty of that. They've got to be in a context, and we should be seeing more sustained pieces of writing within those SPAG sessions. Obviously in Key Stage 1 it's slightly different in terms of your expectations for how much you're expecting people to write. These should be lessons which allow children the opportunity to apply the aspect of grammar they've learned. So it's great to write the sentences and to practice them, but please give children the opportunity within that session to apply it where you can to a more sustained piece of writing, even if it's only a 3 or 4 sentence paragraph. Let them apply those sentences that they've practiced. And I will say as well with this, much of this, there shouldn't really be a great need for worksheets because it's the teacher modelling. So we should be seeing English books where there's a success criteria, but then it's writing. Children are writing. And I think that's what we've got to be careful of as well, is that we're not just sticking worksheets in for writing. The writing book is there for writing. Teachers should be modelling sentence construction. And I'll come more onto that later. There's lots of videos that have been uploaded in terms of support any teacher with the modelling of sentences. If you're not sure, we've got the Allen Peake sentence types, which will be displayed in classrooms. I'll come on to that later on. And we've also got a progression document for Allen Peake, so you can see where different sentences can be taught and where we can be building on them. And that will also tie into the assessment grids as well. And as I've said before as well, sessions should be chunked. So it's not just the independent sessions that should be chunked or the practice right sessions, it should be the SPAG sessions as well. Okay, experience days then, just some ideas. This is my favourite part of the sequence. This is the bit where the magic of writing can be sort of regained, if you like. So opportunities for children to acquire necessary vocabulary and knowledge to progress forward in the sequence. Here I've just listed some ideas of what that might be. So drama and hot seating, which, you know, there could be photos in the book of what the children have done. So I know that I'm thinking forward to next half term, we're doing the Greeks, and we're going to be writing a setting description about the Forbidden Forest. I'm hoping to draw on some of the Shakespeare work that we did, where children go into the hall and they act out parts of the forest, so the trees, and there's sort of a human forest that they can walk through, and that will be our experience day to conjure up that vocabulary. The one thing I will say with experience days as well is please make sure they have a link to the genre and the writing. So it's no good doing an experience day if it's not going to serve a purpose. It's still got to serve a purpose within that writing sequence. So think of my example, the drama in the hall, there will be that aspect, but there will also be a big focus on what vocabulary can we use to describe that forbidden forest. And think carefully about how you word that in your learning objective as well. Loads of ideas there. So things like trips, experience days don't have to cost money as well, I will add. Obviously, we know we haven't got a great deal of money, but there are loads of things there that are free. They don't have to cost the earth to be an experience day. It can be as creative as you want it to be. It could be drama, role play, it can be in the classroom. It could be if you're doing instructions. It could be baking a cake, watching a video clip of somebody baking a cake. It's a stimulus to get the children thinking. So that's what experience days are. Next slide, jigsaw lessons. So I've already touched upon this, sorry. So these lessons allow children to write through the features of genre. They're not a replacement for sentence stacking lessons because we know that grammar remains a focus. So your sentence stacking will be within that lesson. So for example, I've put an example of what jigsaw lessons might look like within a sequence. So jigsaw lesson 1, we're writing the headlines because they need to be quite short and snappy. Children need knowledge of that. Jigsaw lesson 2, we're going to write the leading paragraph. So within that jigsaw lesson, I'd still be focusing on the sentence punctuation and grammar. There might be specific sentence types I want the children to use, but I'm still writing through a feature of that structure, if that makes sense. Jigsaw lesson 3 here. So a part of a newspaper report, I know it's really crucial that children know direct and indirect speech and reported speech. So actually we're going to write a paragraph today. We're going to practice some direct and indirect, and then we're going to apply it so that when children come to that paragraph in their newspaper report where direct and indirect speech is needed, they will be placed to be able to do that efficiently and accurately. Okay, next lesson. So an example of a sentence stacking lesson in a sequence. I've already kind of touched upon this anyway, but I've just put what that might look like in a sequence. Again, there might be experience days dropped in between these, but I've just given you an overview and an idea of what it might look like. And again, this one's linked to a character description. So each lesson is a part of the sequence unfolding. Children can use all of this work then to apply to the practice write. So when they're in their practice write, they should be able to go back to, oh, this is my appearance paragraph. I'm going back to that day where I did appearance, and I've got a wealth of sentence types that I can use straight away, just like that in my practice write, and they can build on that. So we don't want to be wasting any of those sentence stacking lessons. The other point to mention, each sentence stacking lesson is cohesive to the next, and over time it gradually builds up the children's practice write without them even realising, makes their job easier when they do the practice write. By the time it gets to the practice write, children potentially have 15 sentences, 3 paragraphs, depending on how many sentence stacking lessons you've done, to use as starting points. But again, every lesson places a huge emphasis on chunking times and teacher models for writing. Okay, this is, we will touch on this more later on in the second session, but this is also on staff share. The one thing I noticed when I was doing monitoring is that, and this ties into that sort of children seeing a pathway for writing, planning needs to be the groundwork for those high outcomes for writing. And at the moment, some of the planning structures we use, and this is nobody's fault, this is just me reviewing what we do and reflecting on it, is that some of the practice plans, perhaps, they're a little bit disjointed. So we might have a box on adverbs to include, we might have a box on, I don't know, noun phrases, adjectives, but that's all great, but children haven't then got a clear handle on what's going in what paragraph. So children almost need to see again on their plan the actual writing unfolding. So I've stuck with the character description of the wolf and the 3 little pigs. So I couldn't fit it on this page, unfortunately, so it might have to be on an A3 one. But you can see that actually I've set it out in a way now instead that children are writing against the structure that they're going to be writing in the practice write. So they're going to do ideas for paragraph 1, and I've given them ideas of what they could include. Then paragraph 2, I might write around here. I've got success criteria to follow for paragraph 2, and then obviously I'd have paragraph 3 for personality. Lots of templates will be put on staff share in the relevant section, which I'll talk about at the end of this PowerPoint, for you to have a look at and to adapt based on the genre of writing. Because, for example, if you were doing a persuasive, if you're doing a debate, so fors and against, and you're doing some sort of speech or something that lends itself to that, then there are ideas of how to plan for that. So actually you might have 2 columns of a pathway. So one argument for, then the other one against, 1 for, 1 against, 1 for, 1 against. And it just helps children to visualize their writing. So planning is one we will come back to, but it definitely needs to be a pathway to aid the writing structure. So again, children can see that right unfolding almost. So please make sure that you consider that now when you're planning, rather than just disjointed boxes all the way around. It might be that rather than having success criteria on the plan, that it's up on the board, and children have got that pathway, but then they're expected to write around different ideas as modelled by the teacher. So model, apply, and again, plans are not lessons where children just go and plan. They need to be modelled and chunked. So right, we're all focusing on the appearance. First of all, we're going to do this together. Let's come up with some ideas together. Let's look at our success criteria on the board. What do we need to include? Now I'm going to physically model that as the class teacher. Right, you're now going to go away and you're going to do your paragraph 1 plan. And same again, same process all the way through the lesson. So it's chunked and it's staggered. And then lastly, independent lessons. So independent lessons I've already kind of spoken about a little bit, but there is going to be a clear role for the teacher within these sessions now. So it's not going to be a case of go away and write and that's it. The teacher will be active within that session, and I'm going to talk through how that's going to look now. So obviously with independent sessions, we know that the writing is going to be chunked again. So we're having no plot pushers. Right, children, look at your plan. We're only focusing for the next 20 minutes on paragraph 1 of this narrative. That's all we're focusing on. So they go away and write, and as children are doing that, the class teacher is circulating within that lesson to keep a clear handle on what's going on. And we've sort of decided that with that, because it's independent, green pen can be used during the lesson to mark progress rights. But when I say mark, I mean acknowledge what the children have done in line with your success criteria that you formulated either together or for the children. So it's not directive marking. So it can't say things like, can you include a capital letter? It's just literally in green pen, a tick, and then it might be 2A because they've included a 2A. And that's, you need to articulate that to the children, that when I come around with my green pen, I'm going to be ticking the things that I can see that you have included based on our success criteria. And that will then allow children to see what they've already included and what they need to now think about. And I, as the class teacher, oh, actually, lots of children in this room have included 2A sentences. I wonder if now children can think about other aspects of that success criteria. So the marking absolutely is not directive within the lesson because it's an independent right. At the end of the session as normal, you'll still mark in green pen. And then obviously at that point, at the very end of the piece, the marking can become directive. So actually next steps, which I'll link to the assessment grid. So within this character description, you used a range of figurative language. Next time, colon for clauses or whatever it is that is that child's next step. Ideas can still be displayed upon the board from discussions, from the planning process. If children choose to use those ideas, that is up to them. It's up to them if they're going to be independent with that. So that's not you forcing it on them, but we still need to be sort of using the resources and the tools and the ideas and being savvy with that, I suppose. It's up to the children if they then go on to make that independent choice to include that in their writing. Children should have access to their English skills book, the class novel, sentence mats, key vocabulary from across the week, dictionaries and thesauruses, and it should be that well ingrained in children that actually it's an independent right. These are the tools that I need. So I've often said to children at the start of the lesson, who wants to hand out the tools that we know we need for an independent right? And those things go out and the children choose what they think those independent tools are. Success criteria, especially in the older years, can be formulated by children from what they've learned across the week, so what they know the features of the character description is, with the class teacher as well. And that's fine because it's independent. Again, if they choose to put that on their success criteria, that's their choice. And then obviously in younger years, that probably won't be as practical. And then I've already mentioned about marking after the lesson. So that really is a whistle-stop tour of our new writing structure. I mean, I've only focused on the symbols and the different aspects of it. And if I go back to that first slide, hopefully, or one of the first slides, you will see all the different resources that are there to support you. So all of those things are on staff share. They're in English 2020, 2021. So if you go on English, go into that folder, English 2020, 2021, then go into that and it says the new writing structure and everything you need is there, including policy, writing templates, planning templates, exemplifications will be there. The in-house CPD channel, there'll be a link for that. There's a wealth of things there for you to use. And as I say in the second CPD session, what I'd like us to do is to think about in pairs or with our partner teacher. I'm not sure how we'll do it yet, we'll think about that. But actually planning a unit of work based on these sequences. So the key takeaways from this training is that there's two sequences. So there's a narrative sequence and there is a non-narrative sequence, or a non-fiction sequence. It's built around a symbol system, so you really need to know your symbols. Symbols will be on success criteria. There will be an expectation that children are ticking those symbols within the lesson, and children need to be articulating that. Lessons will be chunked, and there's a huge emphasis on the modelling of writing. And those SPAG sessions, those sentence stacking lessons, must be within a context, and they must be cohesive over time. So I hope it's all made sense. Hopefully there's a wealth of things that will support you. And as I say, please do go and look at that YouTube channel as well. Equally, if you've got any great ideas, or you feel like you could share some best practice one day, please send me a video if you're doing that, and I'll upload it, because the more the merrier. I do want it to be a CPD platform, and I do want people to access it. That's what it's there for. And the idea is it's on that platform because no one's got time to keep attending a 1 hour meeting, 2 hour meetings. So they are short bursts of CPD that you can dip in and out of at your pleasure. So I do hope it helps. But next week we will focus on a different aspect. And as I say, this will also be uploaded to the YouTube channel, so you can come back to this and have a look at the structure. I hope it's all made sense, and I hope everyone feels just as inspired as I do by the new sequence. Thanks, everyone.